Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. I actually thought I might cancel today because there weren't too many topics to discuss. And then just reading up on the news in the last 2 hours, we kind of got three extra reports. So I'm immensely fascinated. Also, for some future streams, there are more YouTube videos that I could be reacting to. Like Mr. Who's the Boss just 3 hours ago posted a big AI comparison. Again, I don't really care. I mean, it's supposedly ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, and Grok, so I don't think it's primarily important for an Apple channel, but hey, it's still something more. Seems like the stream is working. We have Riley already in the chat yapping along, saying hi, and saying he's looking forward to the 8 Elite 5 gigahertz coverage. Yeah, I was gonna just like take the article, quickly present it because I did talk to you guys about the Exynos 2500, the MediaTek 9500. I, of course, mentioned like just the raw performance estimates for the next 8 Elite chip. But yeah, in this case, I really wanted to react to the exact proposition behind that performance and probably clarify some misconceptions that are currently being created. Let me check finally if also the chat is working nicely. Yeah, seems like it's all doing okay. That's great. I apologize for the slightly inconvenient streaming schedule. Today I'm streaming at actually somewhat of my regular time, but 2 days ago I was streaming very early in the day. So anybody who still finds their way to this channel, to the streams, and to watch the videos afterwards, thank you very, very much. Shout out for you guys to do the YouTube jazz, as we call it around here. Subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting. You guys know I love interacting with a lively live chat, getting your opinions, your agreements, your disagreements. Of course, you can leave a super chat or a super sticker whenever you catch me live. You can become a channel member here on YouTube. Shout out to Angelica, Max, Steve, and Jonathan, our MarkTech Pro Max supporters. And you can also support us over on Patreon. And with us, I mean me. So we do have some stuff to talk about in the non-Apple world. There is some probably more interesting stuff relating to Samsung, because I know that Samsung is kind of Apple's biggest competitor. It's probably going to be more interesting to the majority of you. However, and as you've seen from the thumbnail, I probably nuked the views of this video by like 70 or 80% by focusing on this thumbnail, because I know my audience doesn't give a flying fart about the Nothing Phone 3. Obviously, like even the 3 here should be in brackets. That's apparently the official fucking branding. But yeah, basically we recently got the Nothing Phone 3A Pro. So it's a pro model of a budget subvariant, which great. That's totally not confusing. I mean, you could call things Plus or just have a Nothing Phone 3A of different sizes or something like that. Or you could have a Nothing Phone 3A, Nothing Phone 3, and Nothing Phone 3 Pro. But yeah, they just wanted to have the word Pro in the name of that budget device, which I guess in some specs is more middle class. It's in no way a Pro device. Yeah, just want to say, I don't like Nothing. I think Nothing is a gimmick brand. Their designs have always been extremely quirky, which I just call random design for random design and attention by media's sake. They've tried new features like that glyph LED layout on top of the device, which now they're very, very much going back on by just reducing it to basically like a small extra LCD screen here on the corner, which already is stupid because this is already on the back of your device. You have a flash on your phone. Maybe creates some extra LEDs around it if you really feel like it, but stop wasting time, stop wasting energy of the phone. Like, if you want to display something on your phone, display it on the freaking front. That's where you have your display. It's an OLED screen. It's contrasty. It's vibrant. It's very bright. It's similarly efficient to just like an LED matrix. just stop fucking wasting space and money on bullshit on the back. And also, please stop with random design elements like this. And this, of course, brings me to now the thumbnail story, which is the Nothing Phone 3 is supposedly coming out soon, but now it's been basically fully leaked. We've understood its specs now for a little while, to be quite honest. It's not like nothing has like I don't even think they want super secrecy, probably, because I mean, why would you, right? You probably want all the media attention you can get, but now you get this completely stupid design that's like I think it's the most random it has ever been from them, which to me is just absolutely shocking, because I thought that the more success they might have in the market, which now I'm doubting how much they even had success with the previous generations of the Nothing Phone, now I'm doubting how successful they even are. If they like, this is their main device for this year, right? This is their main flagship until like maybe a pro model or something like that. But like, this is the device that's probably gonna sell best for them, or would have if they didn't ruin it. But now they thought, oh, why don't we go away from the glyph interface? Why don't we go away from the camera arrangement of the Nothing Phone 2 that actually was pretty popular? Just to show you in comparison, Nothing Phone 2. Right? It has a very iPhone 16 vibe. This is a nice layout. There's nothing bad about it. And the way that the glyph interface around it works, it's nothing crazy. It's nothing that I really like. But it definitely looks still unique. And like, for a $400 phone, having some like these LED glyphs don't add too much cost relatively, right? They don't take up too much extra space. I mean, I still would prefer the phone not have them and either just be cheaper, or put that research and development and production costs somewhere else. But this looked decent. This looked like a regular smartphone. The back looked actually somewhat transparent, even though it's not really allowing you to look inside the phone, right? It definitely had its vibes. And now they ruined it. And when you then look at the bullshit that they then try to do, like the 3A Pro here, right? This is where I would argue that the prioritization of gimmicks over everything else just went way too far. And by gimmicks, I mean like aesthetical gimmicks, right? Why is shopping on top? Okay, bullshit. Yeah, oh my god, Google is getting really outrageous with the sponsored stuff. But yeah, you can already see it had that full circle arrangement, right? It still maintains some of that glyph interface, though it's now barely recognizable as such. And now you have this completely random camera assortment where I guess this is kind of to reflect the fact that this is a telephoto, like a periscope module. And then you have a camera like in line with it, okay? And then you kind of have a triangle, I guess, but it's not recognizable as such because it's inside the circle. In fact, this camera is actually visually interconnected through this extra little surface with the LED flash. So this was completely random. Now this looks kind of like connective circuitry on like a motherboard, right? And it does make some sense once you think about the aesthetic of the Nothing Phone original, the Nothing Phone 2, right? This looks like absolutely fucking nothing. This is just randomness for randomness sake. This is not a good triangle, right? Visually. You have that circular like LED thing instead of the glyph interface, which I guess displays more. But again, why would you waste time and money for this, for making this on the back if you have your front display? The entire point of the back is just to house stuff like the cameras. It's not really designed to be looked at most of the time. Then you have like a random circular element right next to it. You have the camera, the smallest camera here, kind of being connected through a weird, random, extra little oval surface to like what, like a screw, I guess. And then here you actually would have a pretty decent dual camera setup visually. You even have like squares to divide them up. You of course have that random extra color accent in one corner, which OnePlus likes to do. Then you have like things that look as if they are for opening the phone, even though nothing phones are actually not that repairable in comparison to a lot of other more modern phones, right? So, and again, the specs going inside here are actually not garbage, right? I actually don't want to like shit on it completely. I guess it looks a tiny bit better in black, though not really. And then you get also all that discrepancy of each of these little like rectangular surfaces being a slightly different shade of gray. So maybe they want that to be known as like their 50 Shades phone or something like that. But yeah, it features an 8S Gen 4, features 50 megapixel periscope telephoto camera, actually triple 50 megapixel camera on the back. So it's not going to be a garbage phone by its specs. Yeah, Riley, you're saying it's the year of weird designs. You cannot compare that to like the visor on the back of the iPhone 17 Pro or the 17 Air. There's a difference between a distinct design element being part of your product, right? Like for example, the PS5 has like that weird curvy shape, which some people hate. I absolutely love it, right? Apple, well, I guess something like a MacBook is then very simple, right, in its aesthetic overall, but I guess over time it had like the wedge shape to help along. Well, of course, in the front you have the notch to differentiate it, and you don't have to like all all the individual elements. I'm not a fan of, for example, the Samsung tablet having a notch instead of just a slim but slightly thicker bezel, right? I'm like, on a tablet, like with a phone, the reason why a notch can somewhat work is because a phone is primarily designed for portrait mode up top, and it has such a wide screen that when you actually put it in landscape mode, the notch ends up being only a small portion. On a tablet, it's kind of designed to be orientation agnostic, where especially on iPads that are a 4:3 aspect ratio, right, which is about as square as you can make a screen these days. But like, you do have devices with decent specs, and now you don't give them something quirky like that glyph LED UI, right? You don't give them something controversial like the notch, but at least a notch and later dynamic island serves some purpose. Like, that's where Face ID is housed. And if you still want Face ID, you either accept a notch or dynamic island, or you accept a full-on top bezel, like what we see with the Sony phones and how they prioritize real bezels so they can still have full front-facing speakers on both the top and the bottom, right? You can have design compromises, you can have design weirdness and quirkiness, but you cannot have it all at once in one device. And I've never seen the internet actually being that united behind hating this, right? Because you do have everything here, right? You have the weird extra camera with like the oval connection to that screw. You have the LED matrix here with a randomly circular thing here, which I assume this is the flash here. Maybe this is another LED. You have your cameras, and then you have rectangles around it, but you still have these random elements which have been on nothing phones for years now, right? But it's now all being accumulated, and it's all not even like lining up. And now you have these smooth rectangular surfaces, different colors, different shades of gray or white. You have a half circle surface randomly that's not fully cut in half, with like this rainbow structure inside. You have subsurfaces on top of the base surface here that are a slightly different shade of white. and then has another subsurface inside it that's squared off. So this is like a rounded off triangle. This is with then a square uh, and a screw inside it. And what do you get for all of this? Like, why? Like, what designer would, like, because this is actual randomness. Nothing here solves some kind of purpose. Nothing feels interconnected. There's no symmetry here. There's no, like, oh, if I think about it, it's almost like there's a mirror somewhere here or whatever, right? Or these elements connect to each other, or God forbid they tell a fucking story or something like that. Yeah, none of that is really happening, right? I mean, again, I'm not actually, like, I'm specifically, this is why I said it's in the title that it's a weird Nothing Phone 3 design, not that the phone itself is actually weird or bad, right? Almost 5200 milliampere hour battery, given that it's powered by the 8S Gen 4, which is notably less heat generated than the 8 Elite. That's decent in my opinion, right? 6.7-inch OLED, full HD, I assume 120 hertz, right? 100 watts wired charging, 15 watt wireless charging. This could actually be in some ways a decent phone, which, by the way, again, the weirdness of like having wireless charging, right? And you have all of this extra design stuff to waste. Why not do a proper Qi 2 implementation here, right? Give us a circle that's permanently on the back of the phone, that helps people know how to align their accessories correctly, that tells a story a little bit, right, about internal device specs, like, oh, this actually has wireless charging, and look, you can even see it, even if it would have to be like a representation of probably the real charging coil, right? That would, or, oh, it has a magnet for alignment. Look, you can see that magnet, right? That would be something. And yes, that kind of paints you a little bit into the corner, but I would infinitely prefer for them to stay in the corner, to stay in the fucking closet, than do this random bullshit. Yeah. And again, I'm not against like competition and weird designs, but weird has to serve a purpose. I think foldables by themselves are somewhat weird. I think some of the camera arrangements we've gotten on like Vivo and Oppo devices look a tad weird, but hey, they do at least give you extra space physically for the cameras and everything. So yeah, this is bullshit. This is just there to stand out. This is just there for some cheap marketing points. The CEO of the company is already posting how like he broke the mind of tech Twitter. He's also complaining about foldables, like saying every time a consumer buys a foldable, yeah, Lucky, I'm not saying that the cameras inside Oppo or anything are bad. I think that the way that the circle is like super big that houses all the cameras, but I am specifically actually saying that at least that big circle, just from the fact that it's also physically taller, just allows for better cameras to be there. So yeah, there is a distinct reason, and similar to even Apple's visor design, right? It literally increases volumetric space inside the device without making all of the device thicker, right? Now you can argue whether that's worthy of an attempt or not, but I do think it is. But this is just randomness. That's my point. Yeah, Riley saying, bro just likes to make his phone different for the sake of it. Yeah, and he also hates on stuff that he himself doesn't make, right? Like hating on foldables, which I get. I'm not a huge fan of most of the foldables that are currently on the market, but it's a very different proposition to say, oh, I don't like foldables. Look at my Nothing Phone Ultra, right? With the Snapdragon 8 Elite 2, best-in-class cameras, right? We have the best brick phone. We don't like foldables. But you make just this mid-range device that's like okay, I mean, there's Xiaomi 15 to compete with this, right? Or you can even take like a last gen flagship to compete, like then like Xiaomi 14 or whatever. You have plenty of Oppo and Vivo devices. You have OnePlus, like soon there will be a Nord 5, right? Which I greatly prefer over this. For one, I do prefer the OnePlus user interface. I also prefer the OnePlus design. So even if the phone ends up being worse in certain spec points, I would still prefer it over having this mess. Or one buys this and covers this up with a case forever. So yeah, I do not have to like Oppo and Vivo or Xiaomi, right? I do not have to like Samsung, Motorola, and previously HTC, even though literally in my last stream I've talked about how I have historical respect and have liked actually many of those brands, who have actually even been more defending of the concept of Windows Phone in the past when it originally had come out. This is nothing I can defend. Like, this is literally just bullshit for the sake of being different. And yeah, so to not make this rant too long and too repetitive, I've said my part. Let's move on. Again, I do cover competition here, and I do cover competition here fairly and positively when it is deserved, and fairly and negatively when it is deserved that way. Speaking of weird designs that I don't think actually hurt, but I do think are still weird, there is a Galaxy Watch 8 redesign coming up. Of course, I assume coming next to the Galaxy Z Fold 7 and the Galaxy Z Flip 7, which we've covered on this channel. You can actually pre-order them, by the way. So Samsung's Unfold event, Unfold, is it actually called that? Was it previously called that? Why did I call it that? But yeah, Samsung. Oh, is it Unpacked? Oh, they should call it Unfold, right? For whenever they introduce a foldable instead. That's a free recommendation for in terms of branding for you, Samsung. But yeah, basically, there's a Samsung event coming on July 9th. We've, of course, talked about the Galaxy Z Fold 7, the Flip 7, and how they're thinner and mostly have, unfortunately, the same battery capacity. So this is basically just like the introductory material by Samsung. Ultra unfolds. So is there going to be some Ultra rebranding related, or is that just randomness, right? Because we already have the Galaxy S Ultra. Maybe they will call it the Galaxy Fold Ultra now or something like that. But coming along with that is a Galaxy Watch 8. We've, of course, known the redesign of the Galaxy Ultra now for quite a while, which seems very much inspired by the Apple Watch Ultra. Basically, the whole design is this rounded off, squared, rectangular shape, but inside you do not have a display that conforms to this size exactly, but instead you have this elevated screen, which again, I do wonder what that means for durability. Like when you think about, for example, the Ultra and how for durability it actually uses that extra metal that is around the display to push it over the screen. This seems like a little bit of the worst of both worlds, I would argue. Like, for example, on the regular Apple Watch, like the Series 10, yes, the screen is very rounded off and hugs the edges, but for that, you actually get a really large screen relative to the body of the device. Here, you get a relatively large body and still a very simple circular display. So that's a little bit of a disappointment. But I did not expect anything else because I know that Samsung is just not going to switch to a squared screen, at least not anytime soon. It would look like they're copying Apple. It would be a problem with the design of Wear OS. Yeah, but basically they're taking the core design elements from the Galaxy Watch Ultra and putting it now into the Galaxy Watch 8. Basically, it has a little bit less in every way, physically, size, battery, whatever, versus the Galaxy Watch Ultra. but it is now looking a little bit more similar to it. I would still say it looks a little bit more understated, more subtle than the Galaxy Watch Ultra. So you can like it or dislike it. I'm somewhat neutral on it. It's definitely not in the same realm as the Nothing phone. But yeah, I am slightly disappointed that we are not using like that extra space that Samsung is creating here for a genuinely larger screen. And you guys also know my preference for rectangular screens, even if they have very curved off corners and edges. That's still very preferable to me than like having a circle inside the square. That just feels a lot like wasted space. But I guess I think I might react to this event. I don't know. I might be very busy on July 9th. So, but I will let you know if we find some time to react to that. Yeah, feel free to let me know what you think of this. This is definitely not in the bad category at all. Like, I think the Apple Watch Ultra actually felt very much like fuck. The Galaxy Watch Ultra felt very much like an Apple Watch Ultra clone without being objectively one, right? Like they did just enough so like Apple wouldn't have grounds to sue, even though they kind of went over that line in my opinion with the latest Galaxy Buds. But yeah, the Galaxy Watch 8 feels subtle, feels somewhat distinct from a lot of the rest of the industry. Definitely doesn't feel like a clone of the Apple Watch Series 10 or anything like that. So yeah, take it or leave it. I think if you are deep in the Samsung ecosystem, it could be a decent device. Still going to be interesting to see what the exact performance and battery life is going to be like. That has always been a little bit hit and miss for me from what I hear from people actually owning Galaxy Watches, like that it's sometimes a little bit unpredictable. But yeah, overall, I don't think this is going to be a bad product, even though I'm not the biggest fan of the way they utilize this design. But I think that's about it for now for coverage that is, well, we do have one Apple competition story, but that's I'm gonna leave that to the end because I actually have some stories here that are precisely about like what I think most of us are interested about, like specs, display sizes, bezel sizes. They're all for somewhat different products, but I do believe that we are now getting a more concrete understanding of the iPhone 17, the upcoming iPhone Fold, and we're even getting more and more a glimpse into the future of iPad. For example, in my last stream, I covered how the M5 iPad Pro is expected to come out in October. And that Apple has already started producing screens. But let's actually start with, I think, a smartphone that gets not quite enough coverage because it is the base model. But don't forget, the iPhone 16 base model is actually incredibly popular. So the combination of the super clean dual camera layout, good battery life, bright screen, good enough camera in most ways, right? A18 chip with 8 gigabytes of memory, right? Very solid device. For a while, we have gotten rumors that the iPhone 17 would then get ProMotion. There have been some rumors that it might be a 120 hertz display, but one that isn't actually ProMotion, so it wouldn't have variable refresh rate. That was one rumor. I wouldn't pay too much attention to that until somebody like Ross Young comes out and gives us more detail on that. Like maybe LTPO supply was a little bit short. Maybe Apple expects to sell more Pro models this year. Or maybe they are afraid of the success of the iPhone 16 and thinking, if we give the base model now ProMotion, we might not have enough supply, right? We can give it 120 hertz to make this an attractive screen to keep the success of the base models. But if we give it ProMotion, and we might get limited by LTPO supplies, because now we have all basically main iPhone models using LTPO, well, now we're gonna get fucked. But basically, the reason why I'm really interested in this is coming from Digital Chat Station, who has been supplying a lot of rumors recently. In fact, just in this report, we're also going to react to more from DCS. But interestingly enough, we have heard rumors, especially from the most important display leaker in the Apple sphere, who is Ross Young, of course, that the base iPhone 17 would grow from a 6.1-inch display to the 6.3-inch display. In fact, that leads me to believe that it's basically just gonna inherit the display of the iPhone 16 Pro, right? I mean, you already have that supply. You already plan on switching to ProMotion and LTPO. You already have 2000 nits of peak brightness, which also is currently the same on the base iPhone 16 as it is on the 16 Pro. It probably logistically makes more sense to use a somewhat expensive, admittedly, but already existing supply chain for an LTPO screen that most likely Apple could use on the base iPhone models for like the next 3 to 5 years without ever updating it, right? Maybe Samsung would update their own factories in the meantime before Apple asks them to update the actual supplied panel. And then my expectation is that the 17E would then actually be a prime candidate to just inherit the display of the regular iPhone 16. Now, whether that means that the base iPhone 17 also gets the slim bezels, I mean, it already has slim bezels, but the 16 Pro has even slimmer bezels. Whether or not that means the base 17 gets the same super thin bezels of the 16 Pro, that remains a little bit unclear, but it definitely could, given how the supply chains work. Yeah, so basically Digital Chat Station coming out saying it's growing from 6.1 inch to 6.3 inches. DCS has more than 3 million followers on Weibo, which is crazy, and the account has accurately leaked Apple information in the past, and it does line up with what Ross Young has said, who is the VP of Counterpoint Research. Now, the reason why I'm really interested in this rumor is because not too long ago, just like less than a month ago, I reacted to a rumor summary mill, kind of, by Jeff Poo, right? In fact, to this very article. And Jeff Poo came out with some interesting spec points that in this very report I have actually been fighting, right? So for one, he said that the base iPhone 18 is gonna stay on the A18 chip. Now I do have one theory that could justify that. But that still clashes with a lot of the somewhat current reports that mostly said it's just going to have an A19, just like the 17 Air, but then the Pros get the Pro, right? So Apple wouldn't keep main series iPhones like the base and Plus and Air models anymore on older chips, like they did, for example, with the iPhone 15 series that had an older chip than the iPhone 15 Pro. That being said, I could see that happening if one thing is true. If you know, for example, the A18 chip versus the A18 Pro, the A18 is actually a separate die, right? So that Apple cuts off some features, Apple gives it less GPU cores, and they give it way less cache, right? It has half the system level cache from 24 megabytes down to 12. Now, the way that I could see it working for the iPhone 17 is that it gets an A18 chip, but only if the A19 and A19 Pro are actually the same die, right? So basically we would get the fully enabled A19 Pro die here on the Pros, and then maybe we cut off a GPU core, we cut a tiny bit of cache, and make it the A19. If the A19 is a separate die from the A19 Pro, giving it to only one product logistically makes no sense. It will be way smarter to give it both to the 17 and the 17 Air, increase the sales potentials of both models, increase the longevity of both models, right? But if the A19 is just a binned A19 Pro, then there would be room for the A18 to still be reused logistically, right? Because Apple currently still, obviously Apple will keep want to selling iPhone 16 models. They're gonna cancel the iPhone 16 Pro series. So Apple probably still want to produce the relatively cheap and high yield A18 on the N3 node, and then maybe leave the more dangerous N3P stuff to the Pro models and some a binned variant of that to the iPhone 17 Air. Now, Jeff Poo also came out and talked about memory. If you actually listen to leakers like Min-Chi Kuo, they will confirm that the Pro models are getting 12 gigabytes. They will also talk how Apple planned on giving both the 17 and the 17 Air 8 gigabytes, but then definitely decided to give the 17 Air 12 gigabytes. And that the actual final RAM specification of the base model does depend on supply. So can Apple actually source enough 12 gigabyte modules, which I assume would be two 6 gigabyte modules rather than two 4 gigabyte modules? But if they can, then the iPhone 17 base model would also get 12 gigabytes. What's also interesting is Jeff Poo also makes a difference between the kind of memory that is going to be used. Now, technically, 7,500 megatransfers per second, which is the memory inside iPhone 16 and 16 Pro, is already over the 6,400 megatransfers limit of the LPDDR5 spec, but you can consider 7,500 more of like an overclock of LPDDR5 rather than full-on 5x. I'm not sure what this means, to be quite honest. It could mean that we are looking at 8533 megatransfers per second memory here on the 17 Pro and 17 Pro Max, and then 7500 megatransfers memory on the base and Air models. It could also be just something that Jeff Poo misunderstood with his coverage, right? So then he corroborates the 24 megapixel selfie rumor that we've now heard from basically every leaker. He corroborates the fact that the Pro and Pro Max are getting 48 megapixel periscope cameras. He does bring up that weird rumor about structured light, which is that meta lens technology to make a smaller dynamic island for all models. Now, this is a rumor that has continuously evolved because originally it was rumored only for the 17 Pro Max. Then it was rumored for the Pros. Now it's for all the models, which again, part of this technology is specifically that it's more expensive and currently in like low supply. So that would be a weird combination. Like, why waste that money? I don't think that anybody is going to be more or less enticed to buy the base model on a slightly differently sized dynamic island cutout. But even more importantly is that he now clashes with not just Ross Young, which is more than enough for me to doubt Jeff Poo, but now he's also clashing with Digital Chat Station, who, as we now know, has 3 million Weibo followers, right? So I actually now put into question this entire report, and I wonder how much of this is actually like in any way actually like Jeff Poo sourcing, and how much of that is actually just summarization of old rumors, misunderstanding of certain leaks and rumors. Yeah, I just wanted to cover that because in the past I have brought up, like, I believe I had a stream called bad news for iPhone 17 or something like that. And I just wanted to say, it's not like I was covering some bullshit source. No, but to me, this is actually really fascinating, how a lot of leakers are clashing this year. Now, granted, it's not game-changing stuff specifically, but it could be a meaningful difference in how it what it results in down the line. Like, for example, if the base model stays on 6.1 inches and somewhat thick bezels or less slim bezels, if you like, then I don't really see the iPhone 17e jumping to a dynamic island design, right? If the base iPhone 17 does have slimmer bezels, a larger screen, all the promotion benefits and stuff like that, then I definitely see the 17e jumping to a dynamic island screen, because otherwise it's just going to be too outclassed by the regular 17. So yeah, this is fascinating in my opinion, because now it really this is going to be a great year to just have a checklist on which leaker has been correct on what, and basically punish them if they are wrong. Maybe we could see some eyebrows being shaved. But yeah, that's about it for this report. Again, it's not a crazy report. According to Ross Young, we get 6.3 inches on both the 17 and the 17 Pro. The Air gets the 6.6-inch screen, which actually, while I would prefer 6.7 just for full like compatibility with all apps that were designed for 6.7 inches, basically the thing that Apple is drawing here is that the 17 Air is kind of exactly in between, and we kind of got like early dummy models and like display assembly shots that show, yeah, the 17 Air display is basically exactly in between the size of the 6.3-inch models and the 6.9-inch models. So whether or not that's enough for you, I honestly think that the 17 Air is becoming less and less exciting for me, because I do believe that for the vast majority of people, now with a larger screen and ProMotion and probably no significant cuts to battery capacity like the 17 Air is experiencing versus the 16 Plus, for example. I think that most, also dual camera rather than single camera, also stereo speakers rather than mono speakers. Also, probably just better cooling just from the physical size and the fact that it's using aluminum rather than titanium. The only thing that would help the Air is if it actually uses a vapor chamber and the base 17 doesn't. We haven't heard too many rumors about vapor chambers for the base models for a while. In one of my recent streams, I've covered how the Pro and Pro Max, like a big Majin Buu leak showing actually the assembly line of the vapor chamber. Yeah, but for the base models, we are still not sure. I don't know how they would make the 17 Air work, to be honest, without the vapor chamber cooling, because with 5.5 millimeters of thickness, it's just going to be a very problematic design, like to cool. But yeah, we'll have to see, I guess. Next is actually the iPhone Fold. So we have more future of facing iPhone rumors here. This one, of course, looking into 2026 and beyond. Supposedly, Apple is on its way to finalizing the 2026 lineup, finalizing the specs of the Fold included in that. Now, I could still be, being totally honest, I can still see potential for a delay of the iPhone Fold from supposedly late 2026 to sometime early 2027. I just think that Apple really needs to get this right. And they also cannot afford to price it too outrageously, in my opinion. They don't want to hamstring it the way they did the Apple Vision Pro with its like outrageous base pricing. But again, this is just speculation. What we are actually getting, and we have more digital chat station for you guys. In fact, that's not all that we're gonna see from DCS today. Is that basically he got some specs of the iPhone Fold prototype. Granted, we don't yet know. Like, he could have gotten an early prototype. He could have gotten a late prototype information leak, right? So, because according to Min Chi Kuo, Apple still has not finalized it. My speculation behind is that it's not that Apple is gonna change it last minute, but that Apple basically has like 2-3 prototypes, each of which would be perfectly mass producible, maybe slightly different display sizes, but overall same display. Like, basically you would just need to cut it differently in the assembly, right? Basically differences like that, nothing that would actually push the device significantly back. Like, I definitely don't see it being delayed to like late 2027 at this point. Seems like late 2026 and maybe early 2027 is really what Apple is targeting here realistically. But yeah, according to Digital Chat Station, Apple is still testing and is in the unfinalized testing stage. But the thing that he has gotten with what he called the latest specs is a 7.58 inch inner display, which I assume would be just a 7.6 or 7.8 inch display with display cutouts, round display corners. That does make some sense, but it's not perfect because like, we have heard more rumors about a 7.8 inch display, and Samsung is soon bringing out an 8.2 inch foldable. So this is going to be interesting if Apple feels the need to maybe choose one of the prototypes with a slightly larger screen, but with the same underlying technology, the technology that is rumored to be like fixing the display crease, the durability issues of foldable screens and things like that. So yeah, I assume that there is still some wiggle room on the exact display size, but this is what we have right now. We also have dual 48 megapixel rear cameras. That makes sense to me. It's very unlikely that Apple is gonna bring the telephoto cameras to the folds. It's just not going to be thin enough. Like, I mean, they could give it a massive bump, but like, they're not even bringing the ultra wide, which is the slimmest camera assembly that Apple has, to the iPhone Air, and the Air will have a huge camera bump. And my assumption is that down the road it will get more cameras too, like an iPhone Air 2 or 3 could get like a dual camera setup, but I just don't see them bringing the periscope, very advanced telephoto cameras to it. And the same, I think, for the iPhone Fold. There's actually a chance that when unfolded, one half basically is going to that's going to be thinner on the iPhone Fold than actually the main chassis of the iPhone Air. It could be just like 4.5, 5 millimeters, while the iPhone Air is rumored to be 5.5, 5.6, which of course would make any camera bump on top of that, one that could potentially house like the 5x periscope camera, like just outrageously big. So yeah, I do believe this. It's also been now rumored, not for too long, but for a little while, that we are looking at a 48 megapixel camera setup, of course, which does make sense. The ultra wide is now 48 megapixel. The telephoto is going 48 megapixel this year. If it is going to have roughly the same cameras as the Pro models, my assumption is that it's probably not gonna have the same sized main camera. Maybe more something in line with what we currently have on the base iPhone 16 and 16 Plus, which is a 1 by 1.56 inch sensor. But yeah, obviously I cannot be too sure about that. Uh, the other is the hinge. This is a translation from Chinese, so take it with a grain of salt or with a with a translator. It's called a composite material of durable but amorphous metallic glass, which is definitely very interesting. I'm not an engineer to tell you whether or not that sounds about right or very wrong. Seems cool just from the words that are being used, but yeah, I'm not gonna go insane about something that we clearly don't fully understand. And the device body is rumored to be titanium, so this is something that actually would line up with rumors for the iPhone 17 Air. So we've heard the rumors for a little while that the Pro models are actually switching to aluminum for weight reduction because they actually have pretty large and heavy batteries inside. The cameras are getting bigger and heavier every year, especially like the more complex like periscope arrangements and things like that. So aluminum would be a good way to further reduce weight. Like titanium already reduced weight versus stainless steel. Now aluminum could come in and reduce it further. Plus aluminum has some other benefits over titanium, except for being cheaper, which Apple definitely would like, but it's also easier to manufacture with, and it's better for thermals and for radio frequency transparency. So realistically, for a smartphone, it is actually in many ways a better material, but it is just seen as less premium. It is less durable, at least when you look at the same amount of material versus titanium. Well, how much that is really necessary? I mean, Apple has like 5 millimeter thick iPads that are consistent primarily out of aluminum, and they kind of managed to make the 13-inch iPad Pro not even too bendy. So, and this is still gonna be like a glass sandwich layout. So yeah, I think that Apple will still manage durability pretty well, even if they switch to aluminum. But for the 17 Air, which is ultra thin and potentially very, very bendable and all those kinds of issues, Apple is rumored to use titanium. So it does make sense to me that the Fold is also going to be made out of titanium. Again, whether or not that actually will end up being true or something changes, we'll have to see. This is about the layout we can expect, kind of. So Apple is not going with a super tall screen that unfolds into a slightly wide screen. Instead, they're going with a pretty regular screen that unfolds into like even like a passport like shape, and it unfolds into actually a really wide relative design. It looks very similar to an iPad mini. It's also somewhat closer to like the 3:2 aspect ratio of that, so that would make it better for like watching videos and stuff like that and having two apps side by side. Whether or not, again, any of that could be subject to change and Apple goes with a slightly different form factor, I don't actually think that at this point. If something changes, I just think it's going to be, oh, we are going to give you like a 7.8 or 8-inch display instead. But also don't forget that, of course, this is a first generation iPhone Fold. Apple will want to keep their powder at least a little dry so they can, in the future, supply more updates with a Fold 2, Fold 3, everything else like that. We've already heard, for example, that the iPhone Air is rumored to be getting a larger screen with the iPhone Air 3. So Apple definitely has a roadmap up ahead for at least for like the next 3 to 5 years. So if there might be some shortcomings for you in the first iPhone Fold generation, Apple will of course also have to understand what are actual shortcomings for the people buying the product, right? Because there will be tech enthusiasts who will just bitch and moan about the device before it comes out, when it comes out, after it comes out, but they would still not really buy it, right? It would be too expensive for them, or they just don't like foldables, or they don't like that it still has any durability issues. So Apple will have to see what are the actual complaints that are being held by actual consumers, by people with a bit more money in the pocket, with a bit more enthusiasm for actually foldables. Like, we have seen a lot of like foldable lovers, for example, like Mr. Mobile, react very positive to like this passport like shape in the past. So, and while Samsung has not really adopted that to the same degree as like Oppo has, maybe that would be enough to convince more people to switch, especially if it really becomes very iPad mini like. Maybe Apple could give it some form of Apple Pencil support. But speaking of iPad minis, of course, the iPad mini is not the only iPad in Apple's lineup. Boom, segue. But of course, we are looking forward to more iPad Pros, new iPad Pros, and supposedly a future iPad Pro rumor. And this is a rumor that came out like I didn't even see it like until like an hour before I was preparing the stream. But supposedly the iPad Pro is in line to receive ultra thin bezels all around the screen. So as you know, Apple has actually been changing the iPad design over time, and they gave it definitely thinner bezels over time. But after the 2018 models, which is where we got the current design language, we have not really seen a big change to the bezels. What Apple did change with the M4 iPad Pro by using a much thinner tandem OLED screen rather than the LCD, mini LED technology before, they made the device a lot thinner, right? They also improved cooling still somehow and still gave it pretty good battery life. So definitely a great device. But if you are really looking to an iPad Pro that feels about as full screen as it can get, that's still not the M4 iPad Pro. And there are like some competitors, Samsung, like the Tab S10 Ultra, for example, and like the latest OnePlus tablet. They have either slightly thinner bezels or even like a lot thinner bezels. Now they do introduce other compromises for it, like for example, Samsung relying on the notch on their tablets. And there are some questions about like palm rejection if you're typing or if you're drawing with the Apple Pencil or if you're just interacting with the UI in general with your fingers. So this is coming not from Digital Test Station, but this is coming from Instant Digital, also a Weibo leaker, but he has about half as many followers on Weibo. And he said that basically the bezels on future iPad Pro models could be as thin as those on the Galaxy S Tab Ultra, but it will not have a notch. So supposedly the bezels will still be large enough to incorporate the cameras, which probably is going to be a 24 megapixel center stage camera, right? To just align, to be somewhere between the iPhone that gets like a 24 megapixel, but just like very somewhat narrow viewed camera. But then of course, just like the Max, it has center stage and a very, very wide perspective. Yeah. Obviously, the track record of Instant Digital is not perfect, just as it is not with Digital Chat Station, but they have a decent enough track record for us to consider whenever they leak. Earlier this week, we covered a report that said Apple is considering using LG's chip-on-film COF technology for future iPad Pro models. This will allow for future display drivers to be positioned closer to the screen, which could allow for thinner bezels. Whether or not that actually happens in some like M5, like very close by iPad, or we have to wait until like M6. I mean, we are rumored to be getting a redesigned MacBook Pro with M6 chip, so maybe that would be the generation of redesigns. It would also be interesting to see because a lot of Apple's accessories are very much like perfectly aligned, of course, with the size of this device. My question is if Apple is going to give it a larger screen to accommodate the thinner bezel, and then they could actually finally give like the base iPad a full 11-inch screen rather than the ridiculous 10.9, which they just did to make it a little bit worse than the Pro models. Yeah, so hopefully this could then be like a 13.2-inch screen rather than a 13-inch screen, which, to be honest, is just a rebranded 12.9-inch screen. But yeah, we do not get details, unfortunately, about when it's supposedly coming, if it's even referring to this kind of technology, or if it's something entirely different, if it's coming this year, next year, or anything else like that. But hey, if you are interested in iPads with slimmer bezels, now you might have an extra incitement to have to wait for a future generation. Let me see if there's any more Apple related stuff before we get to the last piece of non-Apple leaks here. Sorry, have to adjust still to the changed scrolling mechanism. Let me see if they mention any other details here. Yeah, you see, by the way, the notch compromise here. Instead, the M5 model should look largely identical. Okay, so it's not rumored for M5 at the very least. So hey, if you might want to buy an M4 iPad Pro because you had hoped that the M5 would deliver more than a performance increase, well, now you have more reason to get the M4, I guess. So just look at all of this positively, I guess. But in our last piece of news and rumors today, this is obviously not directly related to Apple, and this is something that some viewers of the channel really wanted me to react to. This is also our last leak in a long line of digital chat station leaks. So we did cover the Exynos 2500, which was obviously designed to come out alongside the Galaxy S25 series, but then was delayed because of poor yields on Samsung's 3nm GAAFIT node. We did discuss how the Dimensity 9500 is supposedly targeting much higher IPC. So the new Prime Core, whatever it's going to be called, DX930 or whatever, or DX1025, however they choose to continue that branding. It's going to be interesting. That being said, we did have also some performance estimates or leaks, if you want to see it that way, for that Prime Core, putting it around 3900 in single core on Geekbench and around 11,000 in multi-core. For the 8 Elite 2, we had a leak that it would be over 4,000, putting it actually above even Apple's M4 Pro and M4 Max chips. However, it was always questionable, like, could it get there? What clock speeds would it need to get there? And seemingly, at least in testing the chip, they are pushing it up to 5.3 gigahertz. Now, whether or not that means that it's actually is going to utilize 5.3 gigahertz in consumer hardware remains to be seen. So if you actually look, for example, at the 8 Elite, that one was primarily tuned for 4.3 gigahertz, and then it had an overclocked roughly 4.5 gigahertz, right? So 5 gigahertz would be 10%, more than 10% higher clocked than even the overclocked 8 Elite. If you know the jump that N3E to N3P allows, that is not going to be an easy thing to like keep up. In fact, Apple has 4.4 gigahertz on their desktop class processors like the iPad Pro, and then roughly 4.5-ish gigahertz on the M4 Pro and M4 Max. The iPhone itself is around 4 gigahertz, so it's way lower clocked. At this point, it would be 20% lower clocked or even 25% lower clocked. I don't see it actually being 5.3 gigahertz. To be quite honest, I don't even really see it being 5 gigahertz. I could see it being 4.8, right? Which would be a 500 megahertz increase over the base Snapdragon 8 Elite if you want. Maybe a 4.9 close to 5 gigahertz version on the overclocked variants. Now, it is going to be interesting if the numbers that we've heard about it reaching over 4,000 in Geekbench single core would mean that that was something that was tested with 5.3 gigahertz, or if it was actually tested on something that would reach actual consumer devices. Of course, there is a chance that they are going to ship 5.3 gigahertz. Maybe that would be reserved for like actively cooled devices. Maybe that would be like a manually activated overclocked mode for like enthusiasts, and then something that could go into big tablets. I mean, similar to how Apple has like an almost 10% higher clock speed on the M4 iPad Pro versus the A18 Pro iPhones. So seemingly, at least that leads me to believe that they are not super duper focused on IPC. But it could be. I mean, this could be just like testing it basically to make sure that it's a good chip that clocks high, because a chip that clocks up to 5.3 gigahertz could be, for example, phenomenally efficient at 4.5, 4.6, 4.7 gigahertz, right? And still have acceptable power consumption in 4.8 or even 4.9 gigahertz scenarios. If a chip only quote unquote reaches 5 gigahertz, then you kind of have to ask, well, how efficient is it going to be in actual day-to-day scenarios? The regular Snapdragon 8 Elite already pushed. Now, while it is definitely more efficient than the 8 Gen 3, but whenever it's running anywhere near max clock speeds, be it single core and especially max multi-core, it does consume more power than the Snapdragon 8 Gen chips before it. So if they push power consumption and with it heat generation even higher, we have already covered on this channel ad nauseum just how unsustainable those peak speeds are. They're basically more the power consumption numbers of like a thin and light laptop or a big tablet rather than a smartphone. So when we are looking at actual multi-core, yeah, you're definitely not reaching those clock speeds. And if you're looking at single core, the question is it even worth the potential extra strain on the device? Riley, you're saying they should have a hole in the back so you can blow air into the chip. Unironically, though, that would be worse, right? Because, well, unless you mean they cut out the glass, but they still keep the vapor chamber. So the vapor chamber has easier heat transfer to air. But yeah, overall, it is obviously still better to just clap as much fucking metal as you can over the freaking chip. But yeah, this is also going to be then a pretty expensive cooling solution. And I'm not saying this to hate, right? Like, look at the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, for example, right? What is its sustained CPU performance, right? And this is a highly rated product by this website, GSM Arena, right? Look at performance testing. So it gives you all that power, then it does not give you all that power in Antutu, then it doesn't give you the full power in 3D Mark. So at least you could then guess, well, maybe that actually means that sustained performance is actually pretty good. Well, in the CPU throttling test, we got a 60% overall result with a somewhat unusual graph, with a relatively small performance decline in the early stages and a more substantial drop later on. So basically, they allow you it to heat soak before they actually reduce temperature. Basically, their hope is you will stop heating it up more, right? So they can give you full power for like 2 minutes or something like that. But if they see, oh, you actually still want to play your game or something like that, well, now we have to drastically reduce it, because if we add any extra heat and power consumption to the device, it's just going to be a little bit of a fiasco, right? But that's the Xiaomi. Let's get to the Galaxy S25 Ultra, which of course we've covered a few times on this channel. Looking at performance metrics here, what do we have here, right? So this actually uses the overclocked version. This is why for single core, it does reach more reliably, like closer to 3100. That being said, for a chip that's specifically labeled for Galaxy, I do still find it funny that even a launch 8 Elite product, I do find it more excusable for devices that come out later on, like the Xiaomi Ultras and something like that. That like the OnePlus already was able to match it in most ways. But then, yeah, it has slower multi-core performance, big whoop. So it also uses less power, and it actually combines that with a bigger battery. But yeah, you also see that Samsung is not even able close to give you the max GPU performance. So probably just the chip tuning has really gone into supplying as much power to the CPU as possible. See a noticeable like 20+% difference. But then in 3D Mark, it's actually leading. So again, optimization between different apps and stuff like that is also a different question. The sustained performance is similar to the Galaxy S24 Ultra, a 41% CPU performance loss, which obviously leaves us with 59% sustained performance, though the graph at least looks a little bit better, and a 50% GPU performance drop. So yeah, this is going to be somewhat complicated thing with the 8 Elite 2 if it pushes power consumption higher. Samsung has been on a trip on reducing thickness and weight of their products. It's going to be, and unless they really want to increase cost by going all crazy with stuff like doubling the vapor chamber, this is going to be a pretty difficult chip to cool. Actually, I want to even look up the OnePlus 13 here. OnePlus 13. What? Oh, it's because you have to write this one word, right? I mean, there is the 13T, the successor, but let me just look at the launch 8 Elite version. So, 3D Mark, higher in 2.2 than Samsung, slightly lower multi-core performance, roughly the same single core. But then when we look at, under prolonged load, it has a 9,925 square millimeter vapor chamber, which is more than the 9,144. It has a 60% stability rating for the CPU, which is 1 point higher than Samsung, and the 63% stability for the GPU. So again, nothing even comes close to keeping even like 2/3 of the performance, really. Like for the GPU, yes, but like if we even compare that to the 16 Pro Max, right, which is a device that does not have active cooling or anything else like that, doesn't have a vapor chamber or something like that. If we look at that, no, performance and stress test. So if we look at its overall powers, the CPU has 78% stability and the GPU has 90% stability. That would be crazy. But this is not Wildlife Extreme. So we are waiting for GSM Arena. First of all, give up on Wildlife and all that bullshit. Just use Still Nomad Lite, please. But yeah, and I'm not talking about the final outcome of performance, but if you can have a device with a smaller chip that consumes less power overall, needs less cooling overall, but the end result is that you still have the same amount of overall performance because, you can, of that smaller chip, and lesser clock chip, you maintain like 80% of its performance instead of a chip that's 10-15% faster. You maintain only 60% of the performance, and it's only really actively cool devices that get you closer to this. Then it's really like, yeah, you know why Apple is doing what they're doing. They're not known to waste their money, which does lead me to now think, what can Apple achieve with a vapor chamber? Because if Apple even just by 20%, similar to what happened between the M2 iPad Pro and the M4 version, by boosting overall cooling capacity by 20%, I now wonder just how much Apple could get out of that, right? Like if a vapor chamber gives you sustained 20% better chip cooling, maybe some other improvements also lead to the display being slightly better cooled, like the potential aluminum body rather than titanium. So let's say your device could sustain maybe 25, maybe 30% more power draw. That could lead to close to 100% stability in certain scenarios, because I don't see Apple just making the chip 30-40% larger and giving us the same stability percentage, but just from a higher base. That would make no sense. That's what the M chips are for, right? Because on the M chips you have even more binning happening. You have actively cooled devices, differently thick devices, and then you have, of course, all the scaling all the way up to M4 Pro and its variants, binned, and how much cooling you have in a 14-inch or a 16-inch version. You have the Max chips, again, binned and unbinned, and then you even have the Ultra variants, which even that has a difference. Is it in the Mac Studio? Is it in the Mac Pro? So yeah, I'm really fascinated what we're gonna reach here. Definitely looking forward to testing with updated tools here. Still, single core performance, by the way, is still untouched for the iPhone 16 Pro, and it's not even that highly clocked. What is the clock speed of the of the A18 Pro chip? It's 4 gigahertz, right? Yeah, it's 404. It's basically exactly 400. It's 430 megahertz slower clocked than the 8 Elite 4 Galaxy. So it has a way higher IPC. And again, Apple hasn't even increased cache in quite a while on those on iPhone chips. So there is a lot of potential here with the A19 Pro, with the Dimensity 9500, with the 8 Elite 2, and I will be covering all of this. Guys, this was a spontaneous one. Again, not gonna make it too long. I thought I might react to Drew. But to be quite honest, I do want to get a good night's rest. I have a pretty packed weekend. I might stream on Sunday evening, most likely not tomorrow. But if I stream tomorrow, then I'm definitely not streaming on Sunday. I'll let you know, as always, on Discord, on Twitter, all that stuff. And of course, last shout out for you to do YouTube Jazz for today. I'll give you a big mark while we wrap up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. Like the channel. Share it out to anybody who you think might enjoy it. Comment. Don't just comment live. Consider commenting afterwards in the regular comment section. And of course, whenever you catch me live, consider leaving a super chat or a super sticker. If you want to become a long-term supporter, you can become a YouTube channel member. Shout out again to Angelica, Max, Steve, and Jonathan. And you can also become a supporter over on Patreon, though you can also link up there just for free. And yeah, I don't share too much on Patreon anymore because Discord kind of replaced all of that. So go to Discord. That's probably our best chance to connect and interact with each other. And yeah, as always, thank you so much. Let me know what you would like to see me cover in the next one. I'll see you then. This is Mark Tech, tuning out.